The Cleveland Browns are the NFL equivalent of a dumpster fire. When a 40-year-old Joe Flacco squeaking out a wild card berth is the highlight of the last 20 years, you know things haven't been going well for your team. This raises a question though. What is it about the Browns that makes them so cursed? You could blame ownership or coaching, maybe even management, but I think it has to be something bigger. I think that the Cleveland Browns may actually be cursed. I know it sounds silly, but there is no other franchise with worse luck at literally every single position and moment in football. Today on FootballLore, we are going to go over the dramatic and devastating curse afflicting the Cleveland Browns. The Browns are a legendary NFL franchise, originating in 1945 and being named after historic coach Paul Brown. The franchise had a loyal fan base and performed well for most of their early history, and had many legendary players such as Jim Brown, Len Ford, Otto Graham, Lou Groza, and more. They really were a good, above-average franchise for most of their history. Under the visionary leadership of Coach Paul Brown, the Browns enjoyed a golden era, marked by an impressive run of championship appearances in the 1950s and early 1960s. Things really started to get off the rails, and borderline magical curse-esque following the early 1990s. The first real kick in the jaw to Browns fans across the nation was the 1994 season when the ownership decided to up and move the team to Baltimore. This decision was extremely unpopular, considering the die-hard nature of Cleveland sports fans. It also doesn't help that most of it boiled down to the Browns owner trying to stiff the Cleveland Indians out of sweet revenue at their stadium. Art Model had shared the stadium with the Indians at the time, and the Browns held the box suite revenue for both teams. Eventually, the Indians got their own stadium because they were tired of this, and this massively hurt the bottom line for the Browns. The entire time, Art Model had been adamant that their revenue was so small he wouldn't notice if he left, but that wasn't the case, and he moved the team because he blew up his profitable operation. This left the supporters, who had been loyal for nearly 50 years at this point, feeling rightfully abandoned and without a football team for years. Adding insult to injury, the Browns' move to Baltimore resulted in mass success with a Super Bowl title within a decade of relocating. In 1999, the NFL decided to finally bring a professional team back to Cleveland. But as we all know, expansion teams notoriously suck. The new expansion team did have some things to be hopeful for. Initially, they had the first overall pick in the 1999 NFL Draft, and were confident they could secure a franchise quarterback. That draft pick was future Hall of Famer, absolute NFL legend Tim Couch. The Browns wish it would have gone down that way. Instead, Tim Couch is known as one of the biggest NFL busts of all time. That was a sign of things to come for the early years of the new franchise. As an expansion team, it's important you have the ability to draft well and make smart strategic acquisitions in free agency. The Cleveland Browns are incompetent at both. Since returning in 1999, they have had a terrible time in the draft, to the point it is easier for me to tell you the good draft picks they had instead of listing all of the terrible ones. In terms of great draft picks you had: Joe Thomas, Joe Hayden, Alex Mack, Kellen Winslow II, Braylon Edwards, and Myles Garrett. There are others that had had decent careers, but most of them struggled on the Browns before finding greater success elsewhere. That is really all of their top-of-the-line draft picks, and they were consistently bad enough to often have a top 5 pick. Their inability to draft was especially prominent at the quarterback position. I am going to lift off all of their quarterback picks since 1999 with their draft pick number, and you tell me of another franchise that has whiffed on a quarterback this many times in such a short period. They had Tim Couch in 1999 with the first overall pick, who was a major bust. Brady Quinn in 2007 with the 22nd pick, who was a bust. 28-year-old rookie Brandon Weeden with the 22nd pick in the 2012 draft. Johnny Manziel with the 22nd pick in the 2014 draft. And Baker Mayfield with the first overall pick in 2018. That is an astounding 0-5 in first-round quarterback picks. Beyond that, there is a superstition that the number 22 is generally cursed for all Cleveland sports, and the fact that they've had 3 busts at the quarterback position while drafting 22nd overall doesn't really do much to disprove that superstition. So we've established that they're an expansion team that can't draft, but maybe free agency isn't that bad, right? First, you have to overcome the hurdle of attracting NFL players to Cleveland. Nothing against most NFL cities, but if you were an athlete with millions of dollars, you would probably want to play in Tampa Bay or Los Angeles too. Second, even when players do come to Cleveland, it's for a hefty price tag. Third, when the same people who can't draft worth anything are also negotiating contract, it ends up about as good as you expect. There was the Willis McGahee deal where they signed a 30-year-old running back on the idea he would replace Trent Richardson, Dante Stallworth, who ended up facing a manslaughter charge mid-season with the Browns. Another 17 quarterbacks not worth mentioning individually because the results were the exact same. And the recent $250 million guaranteed to a quarterback who hasn't played in 2 years, along with enough off-field baggage to drag down transport aircraft. If tomorrow it came out that the Browns had been paying out bonuses to staff who made them worse at football every year, it might explain some of the actions of the last 20 years. I don't think that is going to happen, but that is the level of ineptitude that has been on display. It also doesn't help that every position in management has basically been a revolving door as well. The longest tenure head coach since their return in 1999 is Kevin Stefanski, and has fans acting like a wild card playoff berth with Joe Flacco at the helm is basically the same thing as a Lombardi trophy. Over the last 2 and almost a half decade, their total record is 138 wins, 263 losses, and 1 tie. They have had 10 GMs, 12 head coaches, 2 owners, and a partridge in a pear tree. There is nothing stable about the franchise almost anywhere. NFL franchises are money-making machines. A good NFL franchise is a better money-making machine. Why anyone would allow a team to be this bad for this long intentionally is beyond me. Personally, we at FootballLore think there was probably a ritual deep in the woods outside Cleveland after they were abandoned for Baltimore, where the great people of Ohio placed a curse on the Browns. Seriously though, there are only 1 or 2 franchises in the NFL that have managed to even get near that level of incompetence. The only real question I have for Brown fans watching this video: what is worse? When your team is really bad and you just know they are going to suck, or when they should win a Super Bowl on paper but just can't seem to figure it out? Our personal favorite team is stuck in perennial too good for a solid draft pick, but too bad for a deep playoff run territory. But I'm not sure I would trade with a Browns fan. One more thing we have to discuss that is pretty proof positive the Browns may be cursed is their ownership. When the team originally left, they took their good owner with them. Other than abandoning the loyal fan base part, the Ravens really have had a much better run compared to the new Browns. 2 Super Bowls, and at least like 2 players who have been better than players on the Browns. Art Model may not be a great owner if you're from Cleveland, but Baltimore probably disagrees. The owner who took over in 1999, Alfred Lerner, was handed a bad situation as an expansion team and unfortunately passed away in 2002. At that point, the team was inherited, and while owning an NFL team is cool, I'm sure that is a giant responsibility to take on if you didn't necessarily want it in the first place. Plus, the son who took over, Randy Lerner, is a key investor in European Football League teams, so the NFL wasn't even his main squeeze. In 2012, the Lerner family sold it to Jimmy Haslam, who was starting to turn it around, but took 12 years to get going. Jimmy was so fed up with owning the Browns and them sucking that he ended up buying other sports teams just to feel something again. He owns the Columbus Crew and the Milwaukee Bucks just to make sure his name doesn't get too tainted by the Browns record. I will say Jimmy Haslam does seem to be on the right track, but if there is one thing I think all NFL fans can agree on it is that the Browns will find a way to mess up and blow it somehow. Hopefully, this is a video that ages like milk, and 10 years from now, Cleveland fans can laugh at it after their 7 straight Super Bowl appearances. However, I don't think that is likely to happen. It doesn't help that the city has gone through a rough time as well. Cleveland really is a cool city that gets a bad rap for how rough it was 40 years ago. Before the manufacturing decline of the 50s and 60s, Cleveland was one of the richest cities in the world, but a changing economy decimated the population. Cleveland went from a top 10 city in the nation population-wise to the 54th largest city currently. That much of a drop in population made it way harder for the city to raise tax revenue, and considering that most NFL stadiums are taken care of or built with revenue, it led to a cycle of crappier facilities. The city itself actually ended up going bankrupt in the 70s, and the population is less than half of what it was at its peak. The decline in the city didn't do any favors when it came to free agent recruitment. The city is having a strong rebound, and there are large parts of the city being revitalized now. However, considering the rough road the city itself has been on, they have had bigger fish to fry than football. The trajectory of the US economy of the next few decades should do a lot to stabilize the Midwest and help rebuild the manufacturing base that once was. Hopefully that can bring Cleveland back to its former glory, because a great American city like that deserves it. The people of Cleveland are passionate sports fans who are loyal to a city that a lot of the country writes off, and you have to respect that. In the grand tapestry of the NFL, the Cleveland Browns story is woven with threads of misfortune, hope, and a resilience that borders on the mythical. It's a tale that prompts us to ponder the nature of sports curses and the enduring spirit of both a team and its city. Whether it's the shadow of past decisions, the fickle hand of fate, or just plain old bad luck, the Browns saga is a reminder of the unpredictable heartbeat of football. And yet, in the face of seemingly endless setbacks, the Browns and their fans display a loyalty and passion that could someday, perhaps, break this long-standing curse. Until then, we watch, we speculate, and we can't help but root for the underdog, because in Cleveland's struggle, we find the raw, unscripted drama that makes sports so compelling. Who knows? Maybe, just maybe, the next chapter of this story will surprise you all and give the Browns a fairy tale ending. But for now, we can only wait, watch, and wonder.